Another episode of Rock Boys Football. We have a lot to talk about surrounding this Florida State program and not only what they've done in the transfer portal over the last couple of days, but really what they might be doing over the next couple of days as well. Now, we have to start our conversation around what I think is a fascinating quarterback addition. East Tennessee State's Jaylen King transferring to Florida State, really raw quarterback that certainly has a long way to go as a pocket passer. There's upside to this kid. Now, when he committed to Florida State, we couldn't do an immediate reaction because I'll be the first one to put my hand up and said, I've never heard of Jaylen King before he committed to Florida State. Spent my morning, kind of diving into what he did at East Tennessee State and say, look, I think there might be something there. And this is a guy that fits exactly what Gus Malzahn wants to do on the offensive side of the football, and I think has some upside. No, I'm not going to get up here and say he'll eventually be the quarterback one for Florida State, but there's a chance. And these are the kind of kids that I don't hate Florida State betting on. Like, you're not relying on this kid to start at quarterback really throughout his Florida State career. But if it does work out, this kid could be really, really exciting. Want to get into Jaylen King. Want to talk a little bit about some other targets that are emerging for Florida State. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Florida State fans, especially to the Florida State fans that are watching this and, live and breathe this program, I am sure that y'all buzzed Jaylen King as well and kind of got familiar with Jaylen King. Would love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments section. I don't know if I'm buying too much stock into this kid, but he was so fun to watch this morning, and I would love to hear how you guys are feeling. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it now. Let's just start this conversation off like this. Do I expect Jaylen King to start for Florida State in the 2025 year? No, absolutely not. What intrigues me about this addition is I do think he can provide value to Florida State immediately in 2025. You look at Thomas Castellanos, you look at the Gus Malzahn offense, we know that Gus Malzahn wants to use his quarterbacks in the run game. He's historically done that. Thomas Castellanos, a very good athlete, can certainly be incorporated in the run game, but not necessarily a guy that you want getting tackled 15 times a game. He's not the biggest cat in the world. Jaylen King can be that kind of quarterback. And I'm not saying he starts for Florida State, but if there are certain short yardage situations or certain packages where you want a little bit of a bigger, more juiced up quarterback, Jaylen King is a legitimate dual threat quarterback as an athlete. That's where it starts. And I think to kind of have an overarching take on this conversation is you're getting a guy that I think personally will have the opportunity to provide value immediately for Florida State in certain situations, but also a guy that has 17 starts under his belt at the college level, albeit, lower level of college football, but 17 starts, 2 years of eligibility remaining, plus a redshirt year. Like, this is a guy that let's just see how it plays out for the next 12 months and where he's at 12 months from now. I'm not necessarily betting on him, emerging as a starting quarterback at a point for Florida State. But if that does happen, there's some real upside to a kid like Jaylen King. And I think why Florida State has the ability to do this is, you feel good about Brock Glenn. It sounds like Florida State feels really good about Kevin Sperry. So we have a decent feel for what the quarterback runway is going to look like. Well, why not take a stab at a guy like Jaylen King, especially with someone like Trevor Jackson leaving? This makes a lot of sense. And he's a gunslinger. I watched the North Dakota State game this morning. I think he was 6 of 15. So it was not good in terms of the consistency as a thrower of the football. I swear the 6 completions that he did have in that football game were all big time throws, like legitimate ripping it in across the middle, pushing the ball down the field, can throw off platform. There's a lot this kid is capable of doing. Just has to find his level and be a little bit more consistent. I like it. And I can't wait to hear put him in your back pocket. And let's just kind of see how it plays out during fall camp and going into the 2026 year. I do kind of like the addition. Now, where does Florida State go from here in terms of transfer portal targets? You're starting to hear some names pop up. Now, you saw Biscuit transferring out. One thing I'll say about this is I was a little confusing. You bring him back to Florida State, and I know he was kind of a fan favorite for a lot of Florida State fans. Never really saw him get it. I mean, maybe as kind of that blocking tight end in the Gus Malzahn offense, but really was never going to be a difference maker for Florida State. Not even sure. Apparently, like he entered the transfer portal and the Florida State staff met with him. I don't know if that was a courtesy thing or not, but this is one of those transfer portal departures where I don't think you should have fought to keep him to stay. This is the second time transferred out from the program. Go let him finish his college football career somewhere else. And it's not a shot at Biscuit. It's just like I didn't see a huge pathway for him being an impact guy. And maybe it's time to maybe lean into a guy like Landon Thomas, a little bit younger, a little bit more juice, a little bit more potential. Now, to replace that tight end loss, you're looking at a guy like Dylan Hitt from Ole Miss, a young cat. You know what I mean? You're replacing a guy in Biscuit who had 1 year of eligibility remaining, I believe, with a guy that has 4, that has some upside, that played in the SEC at Ole Miss last year. Like that to me, I think makes a lot of sense if you're bringing a guy like Dylan Hitt. Here's what I want to get into. A couple of names that are emerging. And I want to start with a guy that doesn't even have a 24/7 sports profile, and that's Miles Mitchell, another guy that I haven't heard from. He was on the Senior Bowl watch list heading into 2025. And I'll say this, we've seen Florida State go to the FCS ranks and hit on an edge rusher in Jared Verse. And I'm not saying Miles Mitchell is going to be Jared Verse, but I'm saying this: go look up a picture of Miles Mitchell, then go watch him play at Monmouth. And there's not a ton of opportunity to watch him, but when you do have a chance to watch him, he looks like a Power 4 player. And that's kind of the same thing we said about Jared Verse. When you're trying to find these guys at the FCS ranks that have played really good at the FCS ranks, and you're questioning, hey, can they make the jump to the Power 4 level? To me, it starts with body type. Like, do they look like Power 4 caliber players? And I'll say this, that the numbers and the production are there. He looks like a Power 4 guy. This will be very intriguing to see if Florida State really tries to pursue, but I believe he'll be on a visit late Friday. And again, we've seen Florida State hit on these kind of kids. Another name to monitor, Gavin Sawchuk from Oklahoma. Really fascinating. So Florida State's running back room, it's deep, right? If there's one takeaway we had out of spring practice was there wasn't necessarily a guy that really emerged. Like the name that generated the most amount of buzz was probably Roydell Williams. Cam Davis probably didn't take the step that it sounds like maybe we wanted him to take. We know Gus Malzahn's offense likes to feature a bell cow running back. Who's that going to be going into 2025? We're still not sure. And Gavin Sawchuk, a guy that Florida State fans remember as a true freshman running all over that Florida State team in the bowl game, had over 100 yards. He could be your answer. Now, what's unique about Gavin Sawchuk is we've seen flashes of him being a legitimate RB1 who can be a difference maker at the Power 4 level. You go back to the 2023 season, how he finished that season off. I'm going to read you the last 5 games from his 2023 season. 111 yards, 8.5 yards per carry against Oklahoma State. 135 yards, 6.1 per carry against West Virginia. 107, 7.6 yards per carry against BYU. $130, 5.9 yards per carry against TCU, and then $134, 8.9 yards per carry against Arizona in the bowl game. The way this kid finished the 2023 season, I had him ranked as a top 10 running back in the country going into 2024. Now, what happened with Oklahoma in 2024 is that offense, similar to Florida State, just imploded. Like the offensive line couldn't pass protect. The offensive line couldn't run the football, get anything going along the line of scrimmage in the SEC. And Gavin Sawchuk dealt with some injuries. Only averaged 3.3 yards per carry. If you're confident that you can get the version of Gavin Sawchuk that we saw to finish out 2023 as a redshirt freshman, I don't hate this because he has the ability to be a legitimate running back one. And I think that's what Florida State's looking for. Like, we love having depth, but we want a name to emerge. Look, Usman Kramoa coming in as a true freshman, like that could be a name that emerged, was my favorite running back in last year's cycle. Gavin Sawchuk could be that guy too. Now, that does get a little bit crowded in terms of the scholarships that you are allocating to the running back room. I don't hate it though. It'd be a fun storyline to monitor as we go into fall camp. Last name we'll talk about, Jacoby Thomas, was at Middle Tennessee, then went to Tennessee, kind of a rotational safety that's played a decent amount of football, right? 1,400 snaps during his career. I view this as a floor raiser. You know, you have some safeties that you're kind of waiting to put it together. You have, in my opinion, at least, you have the talent in the room. You talk about a guy like Earl Little or Kirkland or Conrad Hussey. Like, I love those kids coming out of high school, but you don't have necessarily a guy that's played a ton of football before. Jacoby Thomas could be that guy. Like the ideal storyline for here, and this is not a shot at Jacoby Thomas, is you add a guy like Jacoby Thomas and you have some of the young bucks maybe beat him out. A serviceable player, like showed us he can be a serviceable player at Tennessee in the SEC. I think a solid floor raising addition for Florida State. We'll see where they decide to go. Jaylen King, though, I can't wait. I cannot wait to see what it turns out. I'm happy this kid's getting a shot at the Power 4 level because he's one of those guys that has the chance to, I think, be a really fun player to watch. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.